Chapter 1: The Wolf in the Rain. I would save a dying stranger's life before I ever learned his name, and by the time I did, it would already be too late to protect my heart from him. The rain had teeth that night. It came down sideways over blackthorn territory, needling through wool and skin alike, the kind of November storm the old wolves swore you could smell coming a day before it broke. It found every gap in my shawl and settled there, cold and patient, the way grief does. I didn't mind it. I'd stopped minding whether the same winter I'd stopped minding most things a needle and a steady hand couldn't fix. Faster Aloan, mud's rising. My daughter didn't hurry, she never did. 7 years old and already walking through the world like she'd seen the end of every story before it started, she picked her way along the flooding kennel row with her shawl pulled low, watching the ground the way other children watch the sky for lightning. Full-blooded wolves in this pack shifted clean and whole by her age. She hadn't shifted at all yet, too young still to know which way that would go for her, and I'd learned not to let myself wonder aloud. I cut through the old training yard because it was shorter, and because the low road had turned to a river that would soak clean through the only boots I owned. That was the only reason. I told myself that later many times, that it was only the shortest path, and not fate, deciding to bend my life sideways the same way it bent the rain. That was when I heard it. Not a howl, not a cry, a low, ragged sound, breath dragged through clenched teeth, coming from behind the collapsed training shed where nobody had reason to be after dark. Underneath it, faint beneath the wet earth smell of the storm, blood. My nose knew it before my mind caught up and named it. Stay behind me. Aloan had already stopped walking, head tilted. He's hurt bad, Mama. You don't know that. I can smell it too. I rounded the broken wall with my heart in my throat and found a man collapsed in the mud, human-shaped, soaked through, 3 claw wounds torn open across his ribs. No pack mark, no crest. A stranger in territory that didn't forgive strangers easily. Every instinct 6 hard years of widowhood had taught me said walk away. I knelt beside him instead. Up close, even gray-lipped with cold, there was something about him that made the air feel thinner, cedar and rain-wet wool, and beneath it, something warmer I didn't have a word for yet. Look at me, I said, the voice I used on frightened animals and frightened children. How long have you been out here? His eyes opened. Even half-drowned in pain, they held a weight, a wariness too old for his face, and held mine a beat longer than a dying man's eyes had any business doing. Long enough, he rasped. Go, not your trouble. Everything bleeding in my path is my trouble. I was already working my shawl free, folding it hard against the wound. My palm pressed flat over torn skin, over the fast, unsteady drum of his heart, and felt it jump once beneath my hand, not only pain. Aloan, bread now. She didn't ask why a stranger deserved our supper, she simply obeyed. You don't know me, he managed, don't know what I know you're bleeding and I know how to stop it, that's enough knowing for tonight. He laughed short, disbelieving, then a wince. Careless of you. Kind, careless is a different word for people who have never had to be kind for free. Aloan crouched on his other side, unbothered by the mud, and pressed her small palm flat to his chest the way she'd seen it done 100 times by a woman 3 years in her grave. She went still, listening to something none of us could hear. You're not dying, she said, but something in you is still angry. It hasn't finished being afraid yet. He stared at her like she'd spoken a language he half remembered from a dream. What did you just? She says strange things, I said quickly, tearing another strip from my petticoat binding tighter. Don't mind her. I very much intend to mind her. His gaze cut back to mine and held. I worked in silence after that, nothing to splint, only binding, low instructions to Aloan, hold this, press here, don't let go. When his breathing steadied, I pressed the last heel of bread into his hand. Eat, you'll want the strength. You'll go hungry. I've gone hungry before, it passes. I stood, wringing my ruined shawl, gathering Aloan close. I'd have done the same for any creature caught out in weather like this. He looked at me a long moment. Most people don't mean that the way you just meant it. Most people are lying when they say it. I'm tired and wet and I've a girl to get home. I didn't look back leaving the shed. I want that on record. I walked out sure, the way a woman is sure when she's done a kindness and expects nothing further of it because nothing ever had come of it before. I didn't see him watch me all the way to the gate. Didn't know, walking home through the dark with my coat gone and my stomach empty, that the stranger bleeding behind me wasn't a stranger at all. I found out at dawn. The bells at the keep rang before first light, not the low toll for morning, but the high triple peal blackthorn kept for one kind of news only. I stood in the mending house doorway with a cup going cold in my hands, listening to the criers carry it across the wet square, and felt the ground tilt. Hear ye, Alpha King Ronan Ashcroft has returned to Blackthorn Keep, alive, after 11 days presumed lost beyond the eastern border. The cup slipped from my fingers and shattered against the stone. I didn't move to pick it up. Chapter 2, Grey Blood. They call us Grey Bloods, those of us whose shift never finished coming in. A full shift is meant to be seamless, skin to fur to skin again, no seam, no scar. Mine stalls halfway, every time, jaw wrong, gait wrong, something in the bones that refuses the last change no elder has ever explained and no healer has ever mended. Pack law is polite about it, the way pack law is polite about most cruelties, unmarriageable by caste, save by fated bond, as though a grey-blood woman is land nobody wants to farm unless fate itself forces the matter. I hadn't slept, that was the truth of it. Over the cup I hadn't yet dropped, some part of me still caught on cedar and rain, on a stranger's eyes holding mine too long in the dark. I told myself a grey-blood widow had no business lying awake over a man she'd likely never see again. I was wrong about that, I didn't know it yet. Mama, Eloin in the doorway already dressed, old Hesta's herbal tucked under one arm. You dropped the cup. I know. You're thinking about the man from the shed. No qualifier after it this time, just the fact, laid down plain the way she laid most things down, and gone again just as fast, back to sweeping up the shards before I'd decided how to answer. I let her sweep, I made tea I didn't drink. Old Hesta had kept the still room here before I'd married in, had known every root and leaf for 3 miles round Blackthorn, which ones eased a fever and which ones stopped a heart if a careless hand measured wrong. She'd spent her last years teaching Eloin the names of things the way other grandmothers teach nursery rhymes. Valerian, poppy, foxglove, never foxglove, not even to look at. Fate had tried to give me someone once before Aldrich. I don't like to think of it, but the morning after those bells rang for a returned king, old things came up anyway, the way silt rises when you disturb still water. I was 17 when the pack circle called the match Corin Alder, full-blooded, exactly the sort of man a grey-blood girl was told to be grateful for even hoping to receive. I remember my whole chest lighting up like something had finally decided I was worth claiming. I remember him looking at the stall in my shift and telling the whole circle, loud enough to be sure of it, that he hadn't traveled 2 days to bond with something not worth the claiming. I didn't cry, I want that on record. I'd already learned by 17 that tears were a currency grey-bloods weren't allowed to spend where anyone could watch the transaction. Aldrich married me anyway, 2 years later, full-blooded, kind in a rough, unpracticed way. When he died at the border, the same gossips who'd warned him off me nodded to each other like they'd been right all along. As if grief were proof of a curse instead of proof of a war, I gave them nothing to feed on. It's the one skill grey-blood ever taught me I actually value, how to fold a wound shut so tight nobody finds the seam. It was mid-morning, over a stack of torn field cloaks, that I understood exactly how thin that skill could wear. Sella Ambrose ran the wash-house 3 doors down, another grey-blood, older than me by a decade, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, the closest thing I had to a friend among my own caste. She found me at the well with her own basket balanced on her hip, and no patience left in her face at all. You've been called up to the keep, she said, not a question. For mending, that's all. That's never all, Wren, and you know it better than most. She set her basket down hard enough that water sloshed over the rim. I had a girl work under me 2 winters back. Full-blood steward took a shine to her, nothing untoward mind, just kindness, same as you're about to get. Within the month the housekeeper found reason to let her go, called it economy. It wasn't economy. She looked at me, and for the first time in years of knowing her I saw real fear in it, not for herself. A grey-blood who gets noticed gets watched. And a grey-blood who gets watched too closely by the wrong eyes doesn't stay employed long after. You've a daughter, Wren. Think what a dismissal note with no reference does to a girl her age, in a territory where nobody else will take a mother turned out of the keep. I've done nothing to be dismissed for. That's never been the measure and you know it. She picked her basket back up, weary rather than unkind. I'm not telling you to refuse the summons, you can't refuse a summons. I'm telling you to go up there and be exactly as unremarkable as you've spent 6 years teaching yourself to be. Whatever kindness they show you, don't let yourself need it. I carried that with me the rest of the morning, the wash-house warning sitting heavier in my chest than the steward's grand livery had that first hour. It was one thing to fold my own wound shut. It was another to be told, plainly, by a woman who'd watched it happen to someone else, exactly how little it would take to unravel everything I'd built for Eloan if I let myself want something I had no right wanting. "The baker isn't happy today," Eloan said that evening, not looking up from the herbal. Behind his happy voice, "You smell different too, since the rain." "Eloan." "I'm just saying it," she turned a page. "You smell like you're deciding something." I didn't have an answer for that, so I kissed the top of her head instead and told her to finish her letters, and stood a moment longer in our small kitchen, Sella's warning echoing under my own stubborn, foolish hope, wondering whether I'd already started deciding something I had no business deciding at all. The summons came at mid-morning 2 days later. A steward, keep livery, too grand for our low doorway. Wren Calder. His Grace's household requires a mender with steady hands and a closed mouth, effective immediately. You'll report to the housekeeper within the hour. He looked at my hands as he said it, red, work-roughened, the hands of someone summoned for steadiness and not pedigree. He does not care to be kept waiting twice in one lifetime. I set my needle down carefully, Sella's voice still sitting in my chest beside the old seam I'd folded shut 17 years ago, a seam that had just, without my permission, given the smallest and most dangerous inch it had given in all the years since. Chapter 3: The Man Behind the Crown. The housekeeper's name was Marin, and she looked at me the way a woman looks at a stain she isn't sure will come out of the good linen. "Eyes down, hands steady, mouth shut," she said, circling me once in the servants' corridor. "His Grace has no patience left for performance, less than none since the border. You give him plain work and keep your opinions to your own kitchen. Can you manage that?" "I've never had trouble keeping my opinions to myself, ma'am." Her eyebrow climbed a fraction. "We'll see." She set me in a small antechamber off the east gallery with a basket of torn field cloaks, real work, which I was grateful for. I sat with my back to the door and told myself firmly that I had no business thinking about a stranger's eyes or the weight of his hand under mine in the mud. I smelled him before I heard him. Cedar, rain-wet wool. I would come over the following weeks to know that scent so well I stopped needing to name it at all. It simply meant him, the way a name does. "You've a gift for that leg of Peter Coe's," a voice said behind me. "It's healing straight." I turned, and there he was, not the gilded stranger gossip had built for me overnight, but the same man. Tall, dark-haired, a nose broken once and never quite set right, eyes tired even standing still. Plain clothes, no crest. The same stillness I'd knelt beside in the mud. I got to my feet too fast, didn't curtsy, my knees wouldn't have held it. "You let me think you were a stranger," I said, before caution could catch up and clap a hand over my mouth. I was a stranger, for one night I got to be exactly that, nothing else. His gaze moved over me unhurried. "Would you have done it differently if I'd told you?" "That's not the point, Your Grace." "Ronan, in this room, if you're willing. I've had a great deal of Your Grace since I came home. I didn't miss it, the one night I went without." A king offering his given name in a servant's antechamber like it cost him nothing, when I knew it cost men like him everything to hand a stranger that particular key. "Mistress Calder isn't so very different from Wren. Pick whichever costs you less." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "Wren, then?" He crossed the room and looked down at the cloak in my hands rather than at me, a courtesy I understood even then, giving me somewhere else to look while I decided what to do with my own face. "You bound that wound well. Cleaner than the keep physician managed." "I've had practice. It isn't a gift, Your Grace. It's work, done enough times it stops feeling like work." "That's not nothing. Most people mistake ease for ordinariness." He said it quietly, and I thought of Eloan's small hand against his chest in the rain. "Your daughter, where did she learn to say a thing like that to a stranger bleeding in the mud?" "Her great-grandmother kept the still room here before your time. She taught Eloan the names of things. I used to think it was a child's fancy. I've stopped thinking that." "So have I," he said, and something in his voice went strange and careful. I didn't press it. "You gave that boy your coat," he said finally. "It was raining." "You gave him your supper." He was hungrier than I was. There was nothing to ask for. I'd have done the same for any creature left out in weather like that. A dog, even. Something moved at the corner of his mouth again, gone as fast as it came. Most people reserve that kind of kindness for where it will be noticed. Then most people are doing it for the wrong reason. It isn't kindness at all, it's a kind of trade. I heard myself say it and braced for whatever came of correcting a king in his own gallery. What came was silence, and then a short, low sound I realized with real astonishment was very nearly a laugh. "No," he said, "it is not. He inclined his head the smallest degree, the kind you'd offer an equal, and left without another word. I stood by the cold hearth a moment longer than the conversation warranted, and told myself firmly that it meant nothing at all. I was still telling myself that when Maren caught my sleeve in the corridor, her eyes flicking once toward the gallery door. "Whatever just happened in there," she said low, "forget it happened." "Nothing happened, Mrs. Maren, I mended a cloak." She didn't believe me. Lady Seraphine Vale arrives within the fortnight, His Grace's cousin, and I'll tell you plainly because nobody else will bother, she does not share. Not attention, not favor, not so much as an extra log on a cold night's fire, if she thinks it belongs to her by right of blood. I don't know what that has to do with me. Don't you? She let go of my sleeve. It was on my way out through the lower yard that I nearly missed it. A stable hand, one of Peter Coe's fellow grooms, standing over a new pair of boots left outside the tackroom door with no note and no name attached, scratching his head at them like they'd grown there overnight. "Third thing this month," he said to no one in particular when he caught me looking. "Coats, boots, somebody's got more coin than sense and no wish to be thanked for it." He shrugged and carried the boots off, unbothered, the way people are unbothered by kindness that costs them nothing to receive. I thought about it the whole walk home, not the boots themselves, but the strangeness of a keep where good things arrived and nobody claimed them, and didn't yet let myself wonder whose hand was behind it, though some quiet, unexamined part of me had already begun to guess. Chapter 4: What the Grey Wolf Sees. Lady Seraphine Vale arrived on a morning too bright for the season, 4 carriages where one would have done, a crest painted so fresh it still caught the light wet. The whole keep rearranged itself around her the way a room rearranges itself around a draught nobody invited in. Her son came down after her, Corwin 9, dark-haired like his mother but with none of her polish. He stood very still while a footman fussed over trunks, and I recognized the stillness, a child who's learned to take up as little space as possible. Eloan stopped dead beside me. He's scared of his own mother. Eloan. It's just true, Mama. No apology after it this time, no soft landing, just the fact, set down and left there. She watched him a moment longer, head tilted. He's got a whole box of toy soldiers in that trunk, and he's not looking forward to a single one of them. I hurried her on before her honesty could cost us both something we couldn't afford, but I filed it away, the way I'd learned to file most of what she noticed. Corwin and I crossed paths properly 3 days later in the kitchen yard, when he wandered too near the copper tubs, and I caught him before he scalded himself on one left too long over the fire. "You're the mender," he said, not quite a question, studying me with a wariness far older than 9. "Mother says you're the one who's gotten above herself." "Your mother and I haven't discussed my station, so I couldn't say what she's decided about it." He almost smiled at that, the first crack I'd seen in him. "She decides things about people before she's met them. It's faster that way, she says." He looked down at the tub at nothing. "Is it true you fixed the stable boy's leg?" I bound it. His own body did the mending. "I wanted to be a physician once." He said it fast, like a confession, then looked immediately as though he wished he hadn't. "Mother says a duke's heir doesn't tend the sick, he commands people who do." He didn't wait for me to answer. He walked off toward the house with his shoulders set exactly like a boy trying to look taller than he was, and I stood a long moment by the cooling tub, thinking that fear wore very different coats on a 9-year-old lord and a 9-year-old stable hand, and cost just as much either way. Lady Seraphine's public manner toward Ronan was razor-precise. Courteous, solicitous, a laugh like a bell struck 3 times, always the same 3 beats. She reminded the elders gently of how fragile his grace had seemed since the border, how a man who'd nearly died deserved rest, deserved a cousin's steady hand managing the smaller burdens. She appointed herself keeper of his evening tonic, such a small kindness, no one thought anything of it. I thought about it more than I let show. I found myself in Ronan's company more often than could sensibly be called accident, a torn ledger, a question about Peter Coe's leg that could easily have gone to the keep physician and didn't. He sought my opinion on matters no one asked a grey-blood mender's opinion on, and this was the part that undid me. He used it. Told Ordway to soften his manner toward the stable hands after I said, plainly, that a house run on fear kept its secrets from the man who most needed to hear them. Sella found me at the well again that week, her face tight. "You're up at the keep 3 days out of 5 now, it's being talked of." "I'm mending, that's the whole of it." It was never the whole of it for the girl I told you about either. She set her jaw. Wren, I lost my own position once, years back, for exactly this, a highborn boy who liked my company better than his intendeds and thought nothing of saying so where his mother could hear. I wasn't dismissed for anything I'd done. I was dismissed for what I'd become in other people's eyes without ever once choosing it myself. You've a daughter who needs this roof over her more than you need to be noticed by anyone under that one. She nodded toward the keep. I'm not scolding you, I'm telling you what it cost me, so you go in with your eyes open instead of shut. I carried that with me all the way up to the keep that evening, and it was still sitting heavy in my chest when I found Ronan in the small parlor, a stack of mended linens between us, and his hand caught mine, not brushed, caught, deliberate, as I reached to set them down. Forgive me, he said, not sounding sorry in the least. There's nothing to forgive, Your Grace. Ronan, I didn't pull my hand free, though Sella's warning was still ringing plain enough in my ears that I should have. Some newer, more reckless part of me simply didn't want to badly enough to make my fingers obey it. You've gone quiet, he said, something's troubling you. A friend reminded me today what it costs a woman like me to be noticed by a man like you, not unkindly. She meant it as a kindness, in fact. I made myself meet his eyes. I don't know how to want this and be sensible about it both, Your Grace. I've never had to try before. Something in his face went very still, the good kind of still, the kind that comes before a man says something he means. Then don't be sensible about it, he said. Be honest instead, you've never once failed at that. I held his hand a moment longer before I made myself let go and gather my basket, and walked home that night with my heart entirely too full, telling myself I would be sensible about this after all, knowing, even as I told myself so, that I no longer believed it. It was 2 evenings later that I saw the first sign, though I didn't understand yet what I was looking at. Ronan, pouring his own wine, and his hand, steady in every other circumstance I'd seen it, trembled, just enough that a thin line of red splashed the white cloth beneath. He covered the stain with his sleeve a beat too late. Overwork, he said before I'd asked anything. The physician says it's only overwork. Does the physician say why it started only after Lady Seraphine took to preparing your evening tonic herself? He went very still. No, he said slowly, he did not say that at all. Outside, the first hard frost of the season was settling silver over the yard where I'd once knelt in the mud for a bleeding stranger who hadn't yet told me his name. Inside, I felt the shape of something dangerous beginning to gather just beyond the edge of what either of us was willing to say aloud. Chapter 5, read as a fishwife's. I was sent up to the great hall that afternoon with a basket of mended linens, and no warning I was walking into anything more than an errand. Lady Seraphine was seated before the fire with 2 matrons from a neighboring pack, tea going cold in cups nobody meant to drink. I'd nearly finished the small courtesy of a curtsy when her voice found me. That is the one, she said, in the particular carrying voice of a woman who wishes to be overheard. The laundry girl, taken to nursing every stray creature on the estate as though it were her personal ministry. A tutor found for her own child, at the estate's expense, no less. One does wonder how a laundry woman attracts such generosity from persons who ought to know better. The matrons laughed, small, polite, committing to nothing. I set the linens down carefully because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. I don't know what generosity you mean, my lady. I set a boy's broken leg because it was broken and I was there. I've asked no one for anything since. How touching, and your hands, my dear, red as a fishwife's. One can always tell a woman's true place by her hands, whatever airs the rest of her puts on. My hands are red because I work them, my lady. I'd be ashamed if they weren't. A small, sharp silence, the kind that happens when a servant has said something true, and no one in the room quite knows how to answer it. How refreshingly direct, Lady Seraphine said, thinner now. Do run along. I did not cry on the stairs, though my eyes stung, because I'd trained myself years back not to cry where anyone could see it land. Ronan found me an hour later in the still passage outside the linen room, and whatever careful stillness he usually wore had burned clean off his face. She had no right to speak to you that way in my house. She's your cousin, your grace, she may say as she pleases. Not in my house. He crossed the passage, close enough now that I had to tip my head to hold his eyes. I would tear this keep apart stone by stone before I let anyone in it speak to you like that again. That isn't a courtesy, Wren. It's a fact. I pulled back that evening, all the same, the way a burned hand pulls back from a second fire without waiting to see if it will burn twice. Sella's warning was louder in my chest than his words had been sweet, and I sent a note to Marin asking to be returned entirely to the laundry, where the talk couldn't follow me up 3 flights of stairs. Marin ignored the note. She sent me up anyway 2 evenings later with a look daring me to argue. I found Ronan in the small parlor and he crossed the room the moment he saw me. "You're avoiding me." "I'm working, Your Grace." "Ronan," he came to stand close enough I had to set my mending aside. "You're avoiding me because of what my cousin said, because you think I'll let her talk drive you into a corner where I can't reach you." "I think," I said carefully, "that whatever this is costs me a great deal more than it costs you. You'll still be Alpha King the morning after Lady Seraphine decides I've reached above my station. I'll still be a laundry woman with a daughter and one less place willing to have either of us. A friend told me recently what that costs in plain terms. I believed her." Something in his face went unguarded entirely for the first time since I'd known him. He knelt in front of my chair, level with my eyes. "I recognized you the moment I saw you again at court," he said low. "I've been finding reasons to be near you for 3 weeks because I cannot seem to stop finding them. I trust you more after those 3 weeks than I trusted a woman I was very nearly bound to for 3 years. I'm not asking you to risk anything for nothing. I'm telling you what's true and leaving the rest to your own judgment because I think you're the only person I've ever met who deserves that much respect paid to her fear." I didn't answer with words. I answered by not pulling away when his hand came up to cover mine, fingers lacing through my own, and stayed there. Neither of us spoke again for a long while. The fire settled low and I let myself, just that once, stop bracing for the moment it would turn out to be a trade after all. It was well past Aloan's bedtime when she came to the parlor door with a basket she'd been sent up with and stopped dead at the sight of us. She didn't look at our joined hands. She looked at his face, the way she'd looked at Peter Coe's forehead in the rain. "You're being poisoned," she said, nothing after it, no qualifier, no softening, just the fact dropped flat into the middle of the room like a stone into still water. Slow, like my great-grandmother the winter before she died. The fire cracked in the silence that followed. "What did you say?" Ronan asked, very low. Aloan only looked at him, steady, waiting, the way she waited for grown people to catch up to what she already knew. Chapter 6, Poppy and Wolfsbane. He didn't sleep that night. He found me in the mending house at dawn, eyes rimmed with the particular exhaustion of a man who has sat up counting hours rather than losing them. "I need you to look at something," he said. "No, Your Grace, no ceremony, not as anyone's mender, as the one person in this keep I believe would tell me the truth even if it cost me something to hear." He set a small brown bottle on the work table. I recognized the glass before I'd touched it, the kind old Hesta had kept lined along her still room shelf. "Your nightly tonic. Lady Seraphine prepares it herself, has done most evenings since a fortnight after her arrival, sparing Mrs. Pewit the trouble, she says, during the season's accounts." I drew the stopper and lifted the bottle to my nose the way my mother had taught me. Not fine work, not the way old Hesta could have named a dose to the grain by scent alone, but enough. "Valerian and Poppy, both good things in their proper measure." I lowered the bottle. "This isn't a proper measure, Ronan. This is near 4 times what a bad night's sleep would call for, and by the smell night after night, not once or twice. Enough to slow a man, cloud him, make his hand shake pouring his own wine and make 3 physicians call it overwork, because overwork looks the same from outside if nobody thinks to look closer." "Who prepares it?" he said again, though we both already knew, and asking it aloud was only his way of making himself say the rest. "I don't know for certain, only the talk below stairs." I reached across the table and closed my hand over his, no hesitation in it now, none of the careful uncertainty of that first brush of knuckles in the antechamber. "I'm sorry. I know it isn't the answer you wanted." His hand turned beneath mine, gripping back hard enough that I felt the tremor still faintly there. "If I'm declared unfit," he said, half to himself, working through the trap only after he was already 3 steps inside it, "the trustees look next to my nearest male relation, still a minor, my cousin's son. And my cousin, as his mother, manages everything in his name until he comes of age, 10 years, perhaps 12. He looked up at me, and for the first time since the shed, there was something in his face that looked almost like fear, quickly mastered, except he didn't fold it away from me the way he folded it from everyone else. That was the difference. He'd stopped performing stillness in front of me weeks ago and simply hadn't told me so until now, in the letting. "A child told me the truth last night that 3 physicians missed. She's very observant, her great-grandmother was the same. She may have saved my life or near enough to it, and she did it the same way you dressed that boy's leg in the rain, without being asked. Then let's not waste what she gave you. I held his eyes. If you go to the elders with nothing but a child's word and a mender's guess at a smell, Lady Seraphine will call it exactly what it looks like, a servant's fancy, a grey blood's jealousy of her betters. We need proof that holds. What do you suggest? That we find it quietly before we tip her hand. Something steadier than fear settled into the place fear usually lived in me. I'll help you, not because you're a king. Because a stranger let me dress his wounds in the rain and never once made me regret it. And I'd rather stand somewhere dangerous beside a man like that than somewhere safe beside anyone else. He rose, drawing me up with him, close now, close enough I had to tip my head back. I have wanted since that shed to kiss you in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude. I haven't because I didn't want the first time to be born of fear for my own life. When I do, I want it born of nothing but this. That's a great deal to promise a laundry woman over a poison bottle at dawn. It's precisely the moment I trust it most. His thumb moved once over my knuckles, the same small, deliberate weight it always carried now, no longer needing 3 sentences to explain what it meant. Nothing about this morning has been comfortable enough for either of us to be performing anything. It was Maren who found us there an hour later, her face grim, entirely without her usual dry humor. I've something you'll both want to see, she said, and I'd rather show you than say it. Some things oughtn't be spoken where the walls might carry them to the wrong ears. Ronan's hand tightened once around mine before he let it go. I followed Maren out into a morning gone suddenly, sharply cold. Chapter 7. What the Housekeeper Knew. Maren led us up a back stair I hadn't known existed, narrow and cold, the kind built for servants to move unseen through a house that liked pretending its comforts arrived by magic. She didn't speak again until her own small sitting room, door shut firm behind us. Sit, she said, or don't, I'll say it standing then. She drew a folded paper from beneath a stack of ledgers, an apothecary's order, signed not in Lady Seraphine's careful hand, but in a servant's, cramped and hurried, the writing of someone told exactly what to write and frightened of getting it wrong. I've had my eye on her since the week she arrived, call it 11 years running this house and knowing the shape of a woman who smiles too evenly. I had a boy copy what he could from the apothecary's order book, poppy tincture, regular. In quantities no single household tonic could ever rightly account for. Ronan took the paper and I watched his jaw go hard reading it, not surprise any longer, just the weariness of a man watching suspicion turn to fact. There's more. Maren produced a second paper, half-finished, unmistakably Seraphine's own hand, elegant, unhurried, a woman writing something she believed no one would ever read but the solicitor it was addressed to. A careful inquiry into what proof a family would need to have a peer declared incapable of managing his own estate. Nobody spoke for a moment. The fire popped once and I thought absurdly of the fire in the shed the night this had all begun. You might have told her, Maren said at last, and I realized she meant Ronan, not me. All of it, not just the tonic, the rest of what you've been doing quietly this year while you let half this keep believe you'd come home cold. It wasn't done to be thanked. His hand found the small of my back, unthinking. No, but you might once in a while let a person know where to send the thanking, if only so they stop believing themselves alone in the world. Maren turned to me. Peter Coe's coat. The boots left outside the tack room this month. I'd wager you heard talk of those too, if you kept your ears open in the yard. The tutor for the stable children, your alone included, paid for by what I was only ever told to call a friend of the estate. All of it, every strand, traces back to the same source. A fund His Grace set up the week he returned from London, before the border, before any of this. He swore me to silence and asked only that whatever good it did, it be done without his name stitched to it. I thought of the stable hand scratching his head over those boots, of my own quiet guess I'd never let myself finish making. I wondered, I admitted. I didn't let myself wonder very hard. You are the only person in this keep who has ever made me want to stop hiding it, Ronan said low, and I only tightened my hand in his rather than answer, because some things land better left unsaid twice. It was Eloan who found me that evening, once I'd sat a long while at our table without lighting the second candle. You're thinking loud again, Mama. Am. She opened old Hesta's herbal to no page in particular. You smell like him more now. Eloan. I'm glad of it, that's all. Simple, no defense built around it, and back to the book before I could decide how to answer, before I could decide how much of my own heart I'd handed over without noticing the giving. I saw the boy today, Corwin, her voice had gone careful. I brought him one of the tarts from the kitchen. Marin said I could, and he didn't want it at first, said his mother doesn't like him taking things from servants. Then he ate the whole of it anyway, fast, like he was afraid someone would take it back. He asked me if I thought his mother loved him. I didn't know what to smell for an answer like that, Mama. I've never had to smell for a thing that big before. I sat very still, the candle guttering low, and felt the shape of the whole dangerous thing widen to include a frightened 9-year-old boy caught between a mother's fear and a title he'd never asked to inherit. What did you tell him? I told him I thought grown-ups loved in ways that didn't always look like love from where a child was standing. He said that was a strange thing for someone my age to say. She looked up. I said I'd had practice. Chapter 8: The Full Moon Council. The summons came sooner than anyone expected, and I understood within a day why. Lady Seraphine had moved among the elders quietly all that week, a word here about her worry for her cousin's health, a word there about the burden of rule sitting heavy on a man barely recovered from the border. Nothing accusatory. Nothing a person could point to and call a lie. Just enough gentle concern, planted in enough careful places, that the council found itself called a full turn of the moon early, under the polite fiction that it was simply prudent to confirm the succession stood on steady ground. Sella caught me at the well the morning of it, her basket forgotten at her feet. There's talk you'll be there, in the hall itself. She gripped my arm hard. Wren, if you stand up in that room and it goes wrong, there's no folding this wound shut after. Not for you, not for that girl of yours. I'm not telling you not to go. I watched a duke's mother turn a laundry woman out with no reference once for less than what you're about to risk. I'm telling you I'll take a low in myself, whatever happens to you in there. You won't come home to an empty house tonight, whichever way it falls. She let go of my arm before I could answer and was gone, and I carried the weight of that promise and everything it meant about what I stood to lose the whole way up to the keep. Marin had overheard Seraphine's instruction the night before, double it just this once to help him rest through the council. There was no time left to do anything but watch it unfold and be ready to catch him. He found me in the corridor before it began. Whatever happens in there, you do not put yourself between me and my cousin. Promise me that much. I didn't promise, he knew, even asking it, that I wouldn't. It went worse than either of us feared. I stood at the edge of the great hall, Eloin's hand locked in mine, and watched Ronan take his place before the gathered packs with a fog behind his eyes he was fighting to master. His voice came a half-beat slow. His hand trembled once on the arm of his chair before he stilled it by will alone. Lady Seraphine sat near the front, composed, sorrowful, watching her cousin stumble through his own counsel like every unsteady breath were proof of exactly what she'd spent a fortnight suggesting. I didn't decide to move. My feet carried me forward before my mind caught up, past the edge of the hall where a gray-blood mender belonged, into the open space where she did not. The murmur that rose was instant and ugly. I kept walking anyway. Forgive the interruption. His Grace is not unwell from overwork, and I believe someone in this hall already knows that. This is a servant, is it not? Seraphine said to the elders nearest her, light and amused. I don't recall inviting the mending house to weigh in on matters of succession. I didn't ask to be invited, my lady. I'll let this council decide afterward whether a Greyblood's word is worth hearing. I held up Marin's papers. An apothecary order for poppy tincture, in quantities no household tonic could account for, signed in a frightened servant's hand. And a letter, in your own writing, asking what proof a court would need to declare a peer unfit. The hall went silent, the silence of a room realizing it had mistaken a fortnight's performance for truth. Seraphine's laugh came again, thin now, cracking. Absurd, a servant's fabrication out of jealousy or ambition or... Not fabrication. Ronan's voice cut across hers, rough, fighting through the fog but steady enough to carry. He rose, crossed to stand beside me. I asked Mistress Calder to examine that tonic myself because a child in this keep noticed what 3 physicians missed. I trust her counsel entirely. I claim it publicly, whatever it costs me. The murmur that rose then was shock, disbelief, a dozen conversations breaking at once. Ithel, eldest among the elders, raised a hand and got quiet. If these accusations are made, they will not be settled on papers alone. Bring the tonic. Bring proof this council can test before this goes another hour unresolved. Ronan's hand found mine, brief, beneath his sleeve. Seraphine moved first, fast. She crossed the space, seized the bottle from where it sat half-hidden among the papers, and in the scuffle, her grip wrenching, mine refusing to let go, forced its neck hard against my mouth and tipped it. If a Greyblood wants to play physician, she can test the dose herself. I felt the bitter taste hit before I could spit it clear. I heard Elowen scream. I heard, closer, Wilder, Ronan's voice breaking over my name like something in him had come permanently undone. Chapter 9, The Only Test That Never Lies. I don't remember falling. I remember the floor coming up cold and arms catching me before I hit it fully, his arms, his whole body shaking with something past the fever fog of his own poisoning now. No, he was saying low, ragged, Wren, look at me. Elowen was on the floor beside me before anyone else moved, her small hands finding my throat, my chest, the way they'd found a stable boy's forehead once, a king's chest once. Don't close your eyes, Mama, look at me. Elowen, Marin, already reaching for the fallen bottle to smell what remained. Tell me what to do, now. Too much, it's the whole of it, not a measured dose. Her hands moved fast and sure. Bitter root, the tea great-grandmother made when someone got into the poppy jar by accident, blue string round the neck in the still room, hurry. Marin was gone before the sentence finished. Ronan's hands found my face. Stay with me, you do not get to do this, not after I've spent a month learning the exact weight of your hand in mine, I forbid it. You don't, my voice came thick, slow, but some stubborn part of me found the strength anyway, get to forbid a grey blood anything, your grace. Something broke in him, half a sob, half a fierce, disbelieving laugh, and he pressed his mouth to my temple, anchoring himself to the one solid thing left in a room gone unsteady. I will not lose you to the same poison that nearly took me, he said. I've circled around saying this for weeks out of cowardice, and I'm done with it. You are my fated mate, Wren. I knew it the night you knelt in the mud for a stranger with nothing to give you back. I let myself pretend otherwise because I was afraid of wanting anything that much again. I will not lose you now. I gripped his hand harder. That was the whole of my answer I had strength for. Marin returned faster than should have been possible. Elowen guided the cup to my lips herself, steady, murmuring instructions she must have absorbed without ever meaning to. Small sips, it'll taste worse before it tastes better. Great-grandmother always said that part was the truth working through. The hall had gone strange and quiet, watching a child kneel over her poisoned mother and murmur old still-room wisdom like it was the most natural thing in the world, while their alpha king knelt in the same circle, one arm locked around the mender. He just named his mate in front of every witness that mattered. Seraphine did not go quietly at the end. I heard it distant through the fog, her voice rising before the pack guard closed round her. I didn't see Corwin's face. Elowen told me after, gently, that he'd looked more relieved than frightened, watching his mother led away, that he'd found her afterward in the corridor, alone, and asked, plainly, whether he was allowed to stay. Ronan had told him yes before the boy finished the question. The bitter root took hold near dawn. When I opened my eyes properly, the hall had emptied to a handful of elders, Marin and Ronan, still kneeling, still ruined in his own finery, one hand cradling my jaw as though he needed the proof under his fingers that I was breathing. You look terrible, I told him, hoarse. You very nearly died on my council floor, I'm allowed. Is it true what you said about being mated? It's true, no hesitation. I've known longer than I let myself admit. I was afraid of wanting something that much again, and afraid a woman who'd spent her whole life being told she wasn't worth the claiming might not believe me even if I found the courage to say it. And now? He didn't answer with words. He knelt fully there on the cold stone, in front of what remained of his own court, and looked at me like I was the only true thing left standing in that hall. Chapter 10, What the Rain Gave Back. Lady Seraphine Vale left Blackthorn territory 11 days after the council, under guard, stripped of standing and sent to a distant holding 3 counties off, with instructions she was never to set foot on Ashcroft land again. Ronan showed her more mercy than I'd have found in myself, no public shaming beyond what the council had already witnessed. Just exile, quiet and final. I asked him once in the days after whether he felt nothing for her at all. I feel that she was frightened for her son once before the fear curdled into something else, he said. I feel that doesn't excuse what she did to you, both things are true. I've learned to let them sit together without needing one to cancel the other. Corwin stayed. Ronan argued it through the council with a patience I hadn't known he still had after that long, terrible night. The boy came to find me himself, a week later, in the mending house, standing in the doorway the way his mother never had, waiting to be let in rather than assuming the room was already his. I wanted to say thank you, he said, for the tart, and for not smelling like you thought less of me after. Elowen says you can't help what you smell, but I think you could have made it sour if you'd wanted to. I never wanted to. He nodded, solemn, and then, as if the solemnity cost him more than he had left to spend on it, asked if I knew anything about splinting a wing, because one of the yard cats had gotten into a fight with something bigger than itself. We spent the better part of an hour over it together, and it was the first time I saw him laugh like a boy who fully expected to be allowed to stay one a while longer. My daughter's own gift, once folded quiet and careful, became the thing the whole territory spoke of with something close to awe. Ithel named her the youngest true seer the bloodline had produced in 3 generations, and arranged, with my blessing and her fierce delight, for proper training to begin come spring. Ronan courted me properly in the weeks after, openly now, unashamed, in front of a keep that had already watched him kneel for me on a council floor, and had nothing left to whisper that could touch either of us. He kissed me for the first time on a cold evening in the small parlor, slow and unhurried, and told me afterward that he'd been imagining the exact shape of it since the night I'd knelt over him in the mud. "You made me wait a great while for that." "I made myself wait. I wanted it born of nothing but wanting. I keep my promises, Wren, however long they take me to keep." We married in early summer in a small chapel at the edge of the grounds rather than the grand hall a king's wedding might have claimed. My choosing, and he agreed gladly, the way he'd agreed to every condition I laid out before him. "You'll speak to me plainly, always, and whatever I become to you I'll keep the rest of myself besides. My hands, my work, my daughter's own life, hers to shape. I'll not be folded away and put in a drawer like a fine thing kept for show." "Agreed," he said, "and gladly, because I don't want a wife folded away in a drawer. I want the woman who knelt in the mud for a stranger with nothing to give her back." Peter Coe stood among the witnesses, head groom's apprentice by then, on legs that no longer favored the bad winter that nearly cost him everything. Merrin cried without apology for it. Corwin came and stood near the front, and Elowen told me after that he'd looked, for the whole of the ceremony, like a boy who'd finally worked out that families could be chosen as much as born into. Elowen walked ahead of me down the short aisle carrying a fistful of the first lavender from the stillroom garden, because Merrin had insisted old Hesta would have wanted it so. A year passed the way years do, quickly in memory, slowly in the living of it. The fire in the small parlor burned low on an evening much like the one where this had all begun, gentler now, more memory than threat. I sat with a basket of mending I no longer strictly needed and did anyway, because my hands had never learned to sit idle. Elowen sat cross-legged on the hearthrug with old Hesta's herbal open across her knees, sounding out a new word, taller than she'd been the last time I watched her do exactly this in exactly this room. Ronan came in near 10, as he always did now, and settled into the chair across from mine. He reached across eventually and drew the glove from my hand finger by finger and laced his bare fingers through mine. A rook called out by the stables just now made me think of that night. "Which night?" "You know which night." I did, I always would. I looked at the hands he was holding, still red from work, still exactly the hands Lady Seraphine had once named as proof of my place in the world, and had turned out in the end to be the truest ones in the whole house. "It was raining," I said. "Someone had to." He smiled, small, unpracticed, worth more to me than another man's whole laugh, and said nothing further, because nothing further needed saying. Outside, the rook called once more and was still. The fire settled low, the gloves lay forgotten on the arm of my chair, and neither of us moved to pick them up. Character, old Hesta's stillroom saying had always gone, is only ever what a person does when they believe no one of consequence is watching. I understood it fully now, sitting there with my daughter's quiet reading and my husband's hand around mine. It had never been about who was watching from a loft or a doorway or a throne. It had only ever been about the kneeling itself, about choosing in the rain, with nothing to gain and everything still to lose, to be kind anyway. That is where I'll leave them, hands still joined by a fire that never quite goes cold, a boy who learned a family could be chosen, a girl who once smelled truth on strangers now old enough to trusted with the whole of her gift, and a king who learned, the hard way, that the people watched least closely are so very often the ones worth watching most. If a story about quiet strength finally being seen is the kind you want more of, subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you. Tell me in the comments, was it the coat given away in the rain, or a daughter brave enough to tell a king the truth to his face that convinced you first? There's another quiet house waiting, and another quiet woman no one thought to watch closely enough. Stay close, she's coming next.